Hello, everyone. My name is Estra, and thank you for joining us in this afternoon's session as part of our Engage conference. This is such a wonderful space in which we can connect with inspiring leaders in the Niagara region. For this afternoon session, I would like to introduce two of our speakers, Kylene Jackson and Nour Hage. Kylene is a lifelong resident of the Niagara region. She is familiar with the challenges facing youth in the Niagara region and is committed to building inclusive and prosperous communities by empowering youth. To accomplish this vision, Kylene co-founded Civic Connect and currently serves as an executive director. Civic Connect is a youth-led profit that empowers youth by addressing the many barriers facing with respect to employment and civic engagement through skills training program. Kylene is now currently completing her master's degree in political science at Brock University. Welcome, Kylene, and we're looking forward to your input. Our second speaker as well is Nour Hage, and he is the founder and president of Civic Connect, which is a youth-focused nonprofit that strives to prepare young people to lead compelling and fulfilling lives. In the past 3 years since founding Civic Connect, Nour has been instrumental in directing and operationalizing a nonprofit company that is both self-sustaining and impactful to the community. So I'm looking forward to both of you as you are sharing your experiences, and I will go ahead and hand the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Ezra.
Thank you. We're really excited to be here today as well. So as Ezra mentioned, we are really excited to be here today to talk about starting social impact organizations and kind of our experience and some tips and tricks and share that with you. So Nour, next slide. So before we get started, I'd like to do just kind of a little bit of a visualization type of exercise. So just take a minute and imagine what your ideal community looks like. What words would you use to describe it? What would it look like? What kind of problems that are currently social problems would be addressed and fixed? And if you don't mind just typing in the chat how you would describe your vision for an ideal community. I know, for example, things like inclusive is a great one that is central to my vision of a community. This is just a really nice way to start because equity, yes, absolutely. Because a lot of times folks aren't aware that they can actually shape this ideal community and help manifest it into existence. So that's what we're hoping to kind of convey today. So Nour, next slide. So social impact organizations are how you solve these social problems and create that community one step at a time. And today we're going to walk you through what that looks like and what the steps involved in that are and share how we did that, or are currently hoping to do that. So this is our little model for how social impact organizations go from identification of a social problem to social impact. So identifying the needs in the problems in the community, then problem solvers or innovators come up with ideas, which then turn into action through organization. So this idea to action relationship is reciprocal because ideas breed action, but action also breeds new ideas. And this cycle of innovation is kind of ongoing and very dynamic, but collectively, ideas and action lead to social impact via social impact organizations.
So what is Civic Connect? I'll just briefly go over what it is we do. So Civic Connect is a youth-led nonprofit social enterprise. It's dedicated to empowering youth and building our community and the communities of tomorrow in general. Civic Connect facilitates work-integrated learning opportunities that equip young people with the necessary tools and skills that are required to succeed in future economies. And Civic Connect's work-integrated learning model also provides high-quality digital projects to small businesses and social organizations that provide value to the local economy.
So, like all founders, we had a very interesting story of how we started to how we got here. We started as a bunch of Brock University students, we're political science students, in 2018, and we decided to do a first vote conference to encourage youth voter turnout in the 2018 provincial election. So this was a one-day event with local high school students from across the region, hosted at Brock, and it was a great success. Then 2019 came and there was a federal election. So we did another much larger first vote conference, as well as all sorts of other election related programming. We did a lot of outreach, workshops, awareness, youth panels, town halls, that kind of stuff. And then we also expanded the type of educational programming and activities to go beyond just the voting and electoral stuff. And then we also made, which in hindsight was a very great decision to make, the decision to incorporate as a nonprofit. Then in 2019, after the federal election had concluded, we again expanded into the youth career development space and career building space. So in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, youth were really, really affected by it in a myriad of ways. We were most concerned with the impacts that COVID had on youth employment. Things like getting a job, financial insecurity, housing and food insecurity, not being able to work from home, for example, things like that. Just barriers to employment. And again, there's specific barriers that different youth face, obviously. So that's where we decided to focus most of our organizational efforts and resources towards. So to address this issue of youth underemployment and youth unemployment, we went through the WE Social Innovation Incubator Program, and we actually won the social entrepreneurship pitch competition, which would have been really great if we didn't get disbanded in Canada a literal week later, but such is life. We got a few $1,000s out of it, so all around a good experience. But through that experience, and we worked with some other business coaches and mentors as well, and we started formulating a model for how we can serve both the business community and address the issues of youth unemployment and youth skills gaps. So we started offering digital business services to small businesses, which obviously there's a huge need with COVID. And then in doing so, we were able to employ youth that were previously underemployed or unemployed and train them in digital skills. So that was a fantastic experience, and we are able to help a lot of youth and a lot of businesses. And then we also did a lot of COVID-19 community response, like fundraisers for PPE, for example, and other programming to help connect youth with employment, like virtual job fairs and networking events. Then we also launched our Youth Advisory Committee, which is currently conducting a survey and doing a report to local government on the impacts of COVID on youth. And then this year has been our biggest and best year yet. We were able to open our own youth skills studio, which employs a lot of youth from specifically the town of Lincoln, but also across the region, and provides them with work integrated learning, again, doing projects for local small businesses, and they receive a lot of technical training, non-technical skills training, and it's a cohort-based program, which is amazing. We have an office building now as well, which is very cool. We work with all levels of government, and again, we're doing a lot of advocacy around youth and COVID. So when I was in my third year of university, I never thought I would be able to work for this organization that we created together as my full-time job. But here we are, which has been the most amazing experience. So next slide.
So this is just a brief visualization of kind of like where we were to where we're at. We started as First Vote, which was a politically oriented organization, and we evolved over time. And that's what we're trying to depict here. These social impact organizations are rarely ever static, nor are their paths to progression very predictable. Although they can be, and we're going to show you how we would do that if we were to start over. But just to show you where we began and where we've ended up. just a quick look at some of our achievements. That picture on the bottom left-hand side is our new office building that we'll be moving into in September in partnership with the town of Lincoln. So just a brief laugh at our expense and to show that not all not all organizations are founded in the most stable and predictable manner. So obviously as a group of young students, we couldn't really afford a very expensive legal team to get us off the ground and up and running in terms of incorporations and bylaws and all of that stuff. So we actually had one of our co-founders draft up the letters of incorporation, drive all the way to Toronto to drop them off at the provincial office, and then she came back. It took her, it was like a round trip of like 5-6 hours to do so, and then she came back, and then we discovered months later when the mail arrived in the post that she had actually dropped off the letter at the wrong building.
So that was fun. And then another kind of hilarious moment that we like to reflect back on to see how far we've come is that time when I had Civiconnect's kind of business plan stored in the Notes app on my iPhone. So again, this is not anytime recently, but I'm a poli-sci student, so not very familiar with the businessy side of running a nonprofit. I am now, unfortunately for everyone, but there was a time where we were just typing out numbers and writing down notes and formatting our whole kind of business plan in the Notes app. So I still keep that note on my phone just as a reminder of how far we've come. And then we also did a lot of our planning and expansion during COVID. So planning and expanding and scaling a nonprofit organization is kind of difficult normally, but then we did the bulk of it over Zoom. And if you're from the Niagara region, you will be aware at how spotty, to say the least, our internet can be. So planning to grow this organization to over Zoom when people are dropping out of the call was very interesting and quite funny at times as well.
And I don't think I need to explain the necessity of coffee to anything.
We are accepting donations of a cappuccino machine. So these are the 5 main characteristics of social innovation, and social innovation is what breeds social impact organizations. So this model we took and adapted slightly, but the 5 main ways ideas turn into organizations are through innovation. So innovation that is original, meaning it hasn't been done before. There's not already an organization that is doing what you want to do. They're effective, they solve problems, they're better at doing things than the previous things that were in place. They're practical. There's a lot to unpack there. Obviously accessible, functional. They meet a social need. This is the most important thing. So they meet a social need or solve a social problem that is previously unmet and unsolved, which leads to empowerment. Empowerment for the community in general, empowerment for the individuals that you serve, empowerment for you at your organization. And it's the cycle of empowerment, which then can start back at more social innovation. So all of this is very reciprocal, but the end goal is empowering and building capacity to solve these social problems. And next slide. This is just another visualization that we stole from Stanford of how social innovation works. So value, is there a need? Growth, can it scale? And recognizing growth potential and visualizing how that can grow to maximize impact. And then impact, does it work? Which we'll talk a little bit later about constantly monitoring and assessing and adjusting. So there are 4 main types of social impact organizations. There's nonprofit organizations, registered charities, social enterprises, which can be nonprofit or for-profit, and then for-profit corporations that are socially oriented. A lot of, for example, tech startups or green technology fit into that last category. And next slide. So this little diagram kind of shows the difference between the types of social impact organizations. So all of these derive some type of social impact and give back to the community in some way. So there's registered charities, which accept donations, can give tax receipts for donations. They have a lot of benefits from the government. There are a lot of service delivery agencies, things like that. They do really important work. And then there's also nonprofit organizations, which do not have the same kind of tax benefits or restrictions, and they don't have the same recognized status as a charity, but they still don't have shareholders, they don't derive profit, and they operate in the community. Then somewhere in the middle here is social enterprises. So they can be nonprofit like ours is, but they operate in the market space. So unlike a lot of charities that derive revenue from grants and donations and things like that, social enterprises usually derive revenue in part or in totality from the market. So offering goods and services, working with businesses, that type of thing, providing like a product or a service, and then reinvesting that money back into the community. So we are a social enterprise because we provide digital business services to small businesses, and then we reinvest that funds, and by doing that, support and empower youth and promote economic development. And then lastly, there's corporate social responsibility and strictly for-profit corporations.
So just a really old meme here, but I figured you guys would find this funny. Most social entrepreneurs end up being viewed in one of these 6 ways. So I figured you'd enjoy that visual. All right, so I am going to quickly talk about a whole bunch of things in the next 3 slides, so please bear with me. First, how does a social impact organization begin its path to creating social impact? So the first and the thing that must happen before anything else is to conduct thorough research. And this is an exploration of what are the needs in your local community, what are the things that are missing, is the type of idea that you're thinking of in fact the problem? Is it something that is solvable or insolvable? Are there other players or that already exist in this space? All of this stuff is really important before you embark on what is a relatively big journey of beginning an organization. So after you've conducted your research and figured out that, you know what, no, this is something that's really important and there's not enough out there that's being done on it, you can move on to the next step, which is to understand and to figure out exactly what the purpose of the organization is in specific. And the reason for this is because purpose has a lot of influence. Without purpose and without a driving force behind the vision of the organization, you will find yourselves and your team, if you're working in a team, pulling apart and trying to do a whole ton of different things instead of being hyper-focused and specialized on something that is at the core of the reason that you started and the thing that you are most capable of addressing. Without that defined purpose, everything starts to pull apart. The next step is building values and a culture around that purpose and within your organization. Those values are typically in organizations, the members of the team that weren't in the decision-making process of establishing that culture don't buy in into the cultural values and the purpose that the organization has stood for. And so it is crucially important that when you're developing the values of your organization, and every time you add members to your team, you have to incorporate them into the decision-making process around the values that you've built. You have to allow them to put their input into the organization's values, so that every member that is working with you has bought in to the vision and the purpose behind the organization. Without that, you'll find that individual team members remain individuals instead of integrating more fully into the organization. Making social responsibility a critical KPI is extremely important. All organizations have a series of metrics that they keep track of, and it shouldn't be any different with a social impact organization. And And specifically, just like you would keep track of your finances and keep track of your HR and a whole bunch of other things, you should also keep track of that which you're trying to impact socially. And you should make that a critical part of those metrics. So at the top of the list is, are we on track with the social impact we're trying to get to? And if we're not on track, how do we address that? And I'll talk more about that in a moment. The next step is developing a system. This point here is by far the most iterative of all of these. Out of all of these, developing a system is extremely difficult. It's very time consuming, and it's inherently inefficient to begin the process of developing a system. But once it's in place, it is the thing that will make the organization successful. If you don't have a set of systemized processes that you're operating in, then you will find yourself doing repetitive work that doesn't need to be done, or that could be done in a different manner. You will find yourself always scrambling to do the next set of tasks because you don't have a system in place that allows you to organize your time in an effective way. You will find yourself at loggerheads with everybody else in your team because different members of the team decided that that's something that they want to do and that's something that that person wanted to do. Creating that system and allowing that system to operationalize the entire organization will streamline the whole process, the whole thing. Unfortunately, what that means, unfortunately, while developing that system, it'll take a lot of time. Like you begin with a small group of people, and you're building that organization slowly, and you're in the weeds of like just getting things running, and so you may not realize when and how to start developing that system, and you have to force yourself to take an outsider's perspective on what's going on. So take a step back and have like a session to reflect on kind of what's going on in the last month. Are there things that we could do to fix things? And over time, you'll end up building your manual of operations that'll allow you that'll be easily replicable. So finally, after you have your system in place and you're ready to go, you're going to do a whole bunch of tests, and you're going to do a whole bunch of evaluations, and you're going to report. And this testing component is crucial because you want to make sure that the things you're doing are quantifiable and measurable. And you're going to want to report on them, perhaps even publicly, because without being able to state clearly what it is that your impact is, then your organization will be viewed and perhaps even like critically viewed to not be doing enough or failing in its objectives. All right. The next major component of building any social impact organization is building your team. And your team is like extremely crucial in any young organization, even if you were starting any other business, anything that you were to get involved in. Having a series of individuals around you that are going to be part of that core team ends up being an extremely crucial part of it. So again, I'll begin at the top. There's any number of roles within a social impact organization, and each role within that organization is important, and each role brings value, but you must define what those roles are before you bring individuals to fill them. So you have to understand, like develop the chart, let's say, that says like, okay, we're going to have like 8 roles, and each of these 8 roles have a specific set of tasks and a specific set of obligations. And then you find yourself that like maybe your team only has 3 people. Well, then you have to take those 3 people, divide them amongst the 8 roles, and understand that no matter what those 3 people are doing within that role has a lot of value because you've spent the time and you've researched what you're doing to establish the fact that role has value to the organization. Otherwise, you wouldn't have put it down on paper to start with. The next step to having a really strong team is very good communication and transparency amongst the team to begin with. And I don't think I need to overstate the importance of communication. Anyone that's worked in any team environment knows that if there's not clear methods and clear lines of communication between the individuals, then the team starts to break down. People start doing things, and other people don't know what's going on, and it just devolves further and further. The transparency portion may not be as clear to most people. It's very important in a young organization that everyone is extremely transparent. Everybody must know what's going on, because you don't know if you're going to get approached by an external individual that's not part of the organization, and get asked the question that perhaps one of your other team members is doing, and you have no idea what's going on. And you have to know what all the individuals in your team are doing. So communication plus the transparency is of the utmost importance, and like that, I think, is a pretty well-known rule. I'm going to talk a bit about goal setting here, and I'm seeing that the clock's ticking up, so I'm going to try and speed myself up here. So goal setting. There's two types of goal settings I'm going to talk about, the long-term goals and the short-term goals. And both are equally important for any young organization. For your long-term goals, I would encourage, once you have your team together, to sit around the table. And again, this is an inefficient brainstorming process. There's no way to speed this up. The talking and the communicating on this point is going to be slow. It's going to take hours and days and weeks to get this done properly. But it's important that you have buy-in from everybody that you brought in on the team. So what you're going to do is you're going to sit around and you're going to start setting your long-term goals. And I would encourage you to set a extremely long-term goal. So where do you envision the organization to be in a 7-year time period? At the end of 7 years, do you want your organization to be operating in 10 different cities? Would you like your organization to have taken $50 million in charitable donations? Would you like the organization to have 500 employees? Whatever those long-term goals are, I would encourage you to set them and place that as your vision, the thing that you're striving for at the end of a 7-year interval. And get to that vision and your goal with your team so that everybody is encouraged and everyone is driving towards the same thing. I would then, after the long-term goals have been established, move your team over to a short-term goal setting phase. These short-term goals can be both organization-wide and individual specific. And these goals can be, different organizations have different lengths of time that they like to operate with, quarterly, half a year, yearly short-term goals, whatever the determination is. Encourage the team to write down on paper, or digitally, of course, what the short-term goals are. And they can be personal growth goals for a specific individuals or organizational goals. However, the important thing with short-term goals is that they must be achievable and they must be measurable. And the achievable portion of that, sometimes it gets lost on people. If the goal isn't achievable, then you'll get to the end of your quarterly goal and you might be disheartened with the progress because you set a goal that was beyond the scope of what you could do within that 3 months. And I see in chat, Kayleen says smart goals are an amazing tool for this, 100%. All right, so successes and failures, skill development go hand in hand. Your team is going to be comprised of individuals that have many strengths and many weaknesses. And it's important that you know that going in, because allocating your team members to places where they're not extremely well suited will just encourage them, will just make them fail and fail badly. And on this note, people learn more from failure than they learn from successes. However, having such a misalignment in terms of someone's strengths and failures and their roles and responsibilities is probably not a great thing. In the case of an individual who is perhaps not extremely well versed in a specific role. So let's say you have somebody who's very good with numbers, but is not very good at public speaking. Then but is encouraged to learn how to do public speaking, that's when you as a leader or you as a team can encourage that individual to develop their skills over a longer period of time. You can refer back to the goal setting on that. But it's an extremely good tool to realize that teams are dynamic and they grow over time, but that individuals have certain things that they're going to be very good at and certain things that they're going to be very bad at, and figuring out where they're placed is extremely important. And finally, and this is the most important thing on this whole list, having very strong leadership skills. And leadership skills, again, are one of those things that you get to develop over time, but it's important to realize that leadership isn't necessarily being an authoritarian and giving people orders and forcing them to do work that in exactly the way that you want them to do work, nor is it the other side of that, which is to be extremely inclusive and encouraging and, patting them on the head and any time that there's been failures or anything like that. It's a combination of those two things, and it's everything in between. Situational leadership and recognizing when to use certain elements of that leadership is extremely important, and there's no way of developing a team and an organization with weak leadership. This is my last slide on this. The last pillar of getting your social impact organization off the ground and off to a really good start is to get your stakeholders engaged. Stakeholders are anybody within the organization or externally to the organization, specifically externally to the organization, that might be aligned with your values and your purpose. Don't be afraid to make the first move. This is one of the key issues with young organizations. They're hesitant and they're afraid to reach out and find the stakeholders that they identify with most. They've discovered an organization that perhaps aligns perfectly with their values and their mission, but because of a fear, they don't want to make the first move. And if they don't make the first move, no one will ever make the first move, right? The next step is finding yourself a champion. Any champion or any series of champions is extremely good for a young organization. An older mentor, somebody with a large network. If you're within a post-secondary institution, it could be a professor. It could be a teacher if you're in a high school. But finding yourself a champion that can connect you with other stakeholders is very important, and they will be able to guide a younger organization in the right direction. Don't go to stakeholder meetings for the first time alone if it's not required. Bring your champions with you. Bring people that you know are going to be able to help you out with a specific discussion. Because if you have somebody there that's extremely well versed in the topic that you're talking about, then bringing them along is only going to make the conversation more productive. So don't be afraid to invite other parties and make the conversation larger. Don't go into these meetings alone, and don't be afraid to expand the conversation. Go into your stakeholder meetings prepared. There's nothing worse than being on the other side of a meeting with a young, enthusiastic set of presenters, and then realizing that there's no substance behind the presentation. Bring your data, bring your research, bring the purpose and the values of and the vision of your organization. Talk about your team. Talk about the things that you want to do, but be prepared. That's the most important part. Again, don't be afraid. I think I've stated that already. And finally, leverage your networks. Reach out to the people that you know. Get yourself a LinkedIn if you don't have one, and just start communicating with people because without the community, without the people around you, it's not going to go anywhere.
So to tie kind of some of this together, we're going to bust some common myths that either we've heard or believed or other people have mentioned to us. So first of all, nonprofits and charities don't need a business plan. False. Despite these organizations not generating profit and not having shareholders that they report to, they still largely operate like a business, where with money coming in, money being spent on things, staff getting paid, expenses incurred, and there's a lot of business management tools that are needed to actually manage a nonprofit or a charity effectively. So great news is there's lots of help that you can get for creating a business plan. So definitely profit is not the only thing that determines if you need a business plan. Another myth is that there's not much difference between a nonprofit or a charity. Anyone that works in this sector can definitely speak to the difference between the two. Tax benefits and tax classifications are huge. For example, charities receive a lot more tax benefits and, for example, are able to provide tax receipts and things like that. They're also a bit more limited in like the scope of their political activities because of that. But charities are also like licensed service providers a lot of the time and are at the front lines of the community very often. Nonprofits can take many different shapes or forms. For example, even like post-secondary institutions can be considered a nonprofit if they're not generating profit, and they operate under that structure. So it encompasses a really large range of organizations. Similarly, they don't have shareholders, but they do still have a board of directors, and they have a bit more liberty in their like political and public activities, but they're on the business side of things, they're treated more like a business than a charity. And this distinction is really important when you're applying to grants and securing government partnerships. So it's also much easier to incorporate as a nonprofit than a charity. But a lot of people go the nonprofit route and then go through the process of becoming a registered charity. So do your research. A lawyer or an accountant can help with this as well. Lastly, and most importantly, a lot of people believe that somebody else will fix the problem, which goes back to this, other myth a lot of the times that other people even recognize the problem as a problem. So this is kind of the internalized belief that stops a lot of people from actually becoming founders or doing work in the community. It's this belief that someone else will fix it. Somebody else is better suited to fix it. Somebody else is already fixing it that I just don't know about, which sometimes might be true for some of those beliefs, but a lot of times relying on that is actually very prohibitive and the problem doesn't get fixed and we don't get closer to that ideal community. So you have the power and the resources and the lived experience and the perspective to do it. And if you do your research and are smart about it and work with the right people, you can do it and should do it, and don't rely on others to do it. You have the power to create that community. We all do, and especially when we work together. And in that same vein, we just wanted to highlight some other very new and very cool social impact organizations, one of which is founded by young people that we work with in varying capacities. But these are, again, some people that just saw a need in their community and are doing something about it through the forms of social impact organizations. So Bookworm was one of our employees, and she actually founded it when she was in high school, but then came to Brock and found a bunch of like-minded individuals, and they do a lot of initiatives around youth literacy, book drives, that type of stuff. And they're currently going through the process of becoming incorporated, which is very exciting, and doing some stuff internationally, which is very cool. And then Iva's Granddaughters provides mentorship and resources to female-founded organizations, small businesses in the Niagara region, founded by women to support female entrepreneurs to support other female entrepreneurs. And then Sots and Snats provides resources and supplies to unhoused folks. Obviously, they provide Sots and Snats, but other things like toiletries and PPE in Niagara Falls, and they collect items and do an insane amount of outreach and do really good work in the community. So check out these organizations, but just another example of how a need can turn into an idea, which can turn into impact. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. So we're happy to, and then if not, yeah, feel free to connect with us. If you want to learn more, we do tons of stuff. We're happy to chat. We're accepting volunteers and committee members and all of that fun stuff. So please feel free to connect with us as well. If you're thinking about starting a social impact organization, we would love to chat with you and help if possible. It's one of our favorite things to do. So please connect with us about that, or if there's any questions or anything like that.
Last takers on questions. Otherwise, we're going to give you 5 minutes of your day back.
Hello, both of you again. So I was so inspired by the way both of you spoke and the amount of encouragement and leadership that's in the line of work that you do. What's so inspiring as well that both of you rely on that community work. And even though you are so established in the work that you do, you still rely so much on that and you emphasize on that a lot. So that is so inspiring to see for all the new professionals who are thinking of creating a nonprofit organization. So that is such a key component is to take this community aspect and let that be the driving force to allow you to be where you are today. So I thank both of you. I'm very inspired by the work that both of you are doing and continuing to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
No, yeah, and you said LinkedIn is a great place to connect with you, and hopefully that anyone that has attended wrote down the emails, and I think you do have a website as well, which is
Yep, civiconnect.ca.
Perfect. That's easy enough for people to remember. So please go in there, check them out, and get involved. So thank you so much for both of you, and have a wonderful
Thank you very much.
rest of the week. Okay, take care.